We're on site with the Measured podcast at MREC 2025, filming from the RSC booth. A great opportunity to catch up with friends and colleagues, and I roped a few of them into chatting about what they're up to and how they're helping changing the industry. In this chat, I sat down with Matt Briggs. Matt is a non-exec with ASX-listed Odyssey Gold, who are developing gold projects in the Murchison gold fields in WA, Australia. But that's not the topic of this discussion. Matt is one of the driving forces behind the recently announced Minerals Reporting Australia initiative. This is of significant personal and professional interest to me, and I asked Matt what led to the creation of this group and what they're trying to achieve. Hope you get something out of this chat. Enjoy.
Well, that too, right? But anyway. But look, so Minerals Reporting Australia. How are you involved? How did you get involved with this yourself?
I think it came out of some conversations that Jackie and I had, potentially out of that podcast. We had a chat after that, the webcast that you did about the JORC update.
Yeah.
So we started getting together sort of once a month and thinking about, let's look at announcements. What do we like about them? Mm-hmm. What would we do differently? Mm-hmm. And that's where MRA came out of it. Sharing the benefit of the peer review experience and just having the conversations about reporting.
Yeah. And that's because, and without going into too much detail about this, the reviewing of reports, I mean, it's highly subjective, obviously, and it's complicated to get a balanced view, as I have personal experience with going through quite a bad experience with that a number of years ago now. So how do you foresee this? How do you foresee this happening? What platform can you create where you can actually distribute that knowledge for a wider group to just freely tap into without breaking some sort of law around that distribution of information, right? Because you can go on LinkedIn right now and write a nasty post about an announcement that you see, which is probably one side of the spectrum, right? But if you try to do this professionally through an organization, I can see some conflicts coming up. How do you guys intend to manage that?
From the outset, one thing that we've been very clear about is wanting to be constructive in the discussions and being respectful of the people. We talk about the work. We don't criticize and identify the people through the process. Defamation is potentially an issue, and that's one protection from defamation. And our desire is not to defame people. It's not to create people as pariahs out of it. It's saying, let's as a community get together, look at how we're reporting. Does the standard work?
Yeah, right.
Are there gaps in the guidelines that are out there at the moment that we can put out information through these groups to the ASX, ASIC potentially of, ASX is picking up, how many are you picking up? I think I counted 130, 140 in the last few months of last year. If we see themes coming up out of that, obviously it's
education opportunities.
There's
right?
education that needs to come out.
That's the whole reason we're doing it, because you can see what people are getting wrong, if you like.
So it was seeing that gap and saying, well, there's a need for more guidance, more education, and let's do that through getting a bunch of peers together. Having the conversation about people from the market side and the technical side, hopefully the compliance side, maybe ASIC and ASX people might want to come in and vent their frustrations and say, can you guys do something about this?
Yeah.
And it's not even so much about JORC specifically, but about the clarity, starting to communicate what materiality means, because I think that's a huge
How long do we?
I was going to ask a question here, but that's probably a 2-day discussion. Here, and it's about education, shared experiences, and providing guidance to improve the standard of reporting.
Right. And how do you? Because Jackie this morning during a book launch said something interesting, and I mean it's not a novelty, but I get stuck on this, and we as a community get stuck on this as well. You have the speeding tickets, right? So all the stuff that I monitor, we call them speeding tickets because they're just, you could call them competence things, but they're just things that people should have gotten right by following a set of rules. and guidelines, and then there is the competency bit, and it's incredibly hard to untangle that from even from a compliance perspective, right? Because you don't see the ASX talking about obviously the quality of the block model, right? That's or what inverse distance estimation they've used, as we heard yesterday, is still being used by 25% of the people out there. So there will probably, and this might be a leading question, but because I probably know the answer to it, but are you trying to focus more on that compliance side, or is there also an intention, I mean, because I know Jack is really passionate about competency building and training, about the pure technical capability that underpins all of those. Are you looking for those patterns as well in the data to try and fill some blanks there?
Yeah, so as we're having the conversation, those things come out. So our philosophy primarily is about the standard of reporting.
Yes.
So has what should be said been said?
Yeah.
And
okay.
Does it have the right?
Okay.
You know, is it over optimism in the way it's being presented, etc. The technical is going to come out of that, and we've got, you know, I do my own scoring, and we discuss that scoring, and just for my own interest, for my own share trading, which we've addressed that conflict in the discussions. But you know, it's about fundamentals, the quality of the disclosure, and then the tone of the disclosure, whether we think that that's reflected by the data that's been put out there as well.
Yeah. Okay. So, and what are the next steps? Because you've obviously been at this for some time in terms of planning, and you know the Minerals Reporting Australia is registered, right? Yeah. So, could you just talk about the structure very briefly?
Yeah. So we've been getting together. There's been 5 or 6 of us that get together once a month. Sometimes have conversations about announcements. In between. And then in sort of February, Jackie said, we think there's benefit to sharing the idea with other people. Let's formalise this. ASIC had their their input into what sort of organisation it should be. Yeah. Jackie took care of that side of it. But for us, fundamentally, it's about putting together groups of people with people who've got a lot of experience, and we're somewhat trying to aim for people that we think do better quality announcements and technical work, and put those together with people who are less experienced, up and coming reporting. You know, if there's structural geologists, metallurgists, processing people, surveyors, engineers who want to be involved in the discussions, we want those sort of people involved. As well.
And who guides the guides? You know, the famous phrase of, obviously you put your line of governance in, but who governs the governors, and how do you protect yourself against that? And because I went through this myself when I first set up OPEX, and we had this reviewing thing that we discussed before, and your judge and executioner all in one, and I wanted to avoid that by getting 50 people involved who were completely independent from me, but who ultimately, I guess if I'm really honest to myself, I allowed them into that group because I judged them competent. So somebody has to make the final executive level decision about who's able to sit at the table, because if you don't, then suddenly you got all sorts of people sitting around that table, and they all have different interests. So it's really difficult, I'd imagine, from a governance structure to stay true to that cause and not to let the power corrupt you, which is what a lot of organizations struggle with. So there is a philosophical argument in who guides the guides and how you tend to protect yourself there.
Yeah, so we've put a lot of thought into this, and as I said from the outset, it's even in their own discussion, it's being constructive and being respectful, and that's there from the outset. So one of the early documents that we came up with was, the code of conduct, code of ethics document. So we've got that. We've got a complaints process set up, and that's both considering, we'd aim to maybe be a RPO in the future if that's the way the organisation wants to go. So it needs to have that complaints process about the quality of the work. that's being done, but also about the way that people are operating within the organisation as well.
If I presume that's run by volunteers,
Yes.
right? So how would that fail any less spectacularly than the complaints processes through the AusIMM and the AIG at the moment?
Well,
I wasn't going to ask easy questions, right? Because I've seen that process happen, and as we all know, people are bitterly frustrated with it, not because of the good volunteers who are putting their time up. Any complaint takes 9 months. The people on there don't actually, always have all the knowledge or information. They need to go external, and it turns into this protected process. Then there's the legality of it that the institutes don't want to deal with, and it turns into a shit show. Right, and that's why nobody complains anymore, right? That entire, and I got my own thoughts on that as you know. But how would you, if you're still going with the key variables of volunteers, which makes me shudder because the volunteering is dying in the world for all the reasons discussed on many podcasts that you can get into. So you are building on the dying breed of a few of those people who still have those 80 hours in a week to do this justice.
it's not just those people.
Okay.
So we have mandatory volunteering.
Mandatory volunteering. Okay. That will tell you must volunteer. Is that an oxymoron? Is that the wrong word for it?
No, it is. So it's an opt-in thing. So when you put in your application, we list our code of ethics there, and you have to tick the boxes on the code of ethics of what we want you to do.
Yeah.
It's already in our constitution that if you're a member if you're a full member in the organisation, you're already opting into the review process. So we're expecting people to do five documented reviews in a year as a part of
Got it. Okay.
adding value to the organisation, and also that continuous learning aspect that we want people to have, which is a philosophy of all of the organisation.
And somebody's going to administer that then, right?
Yeah.
And which is the committee or the board or a subcommittee or?
You know, we're a committee of three directors at the moment, and we want a core group of those experienced reporters in there, and that core group of, if we can start with about 20, that would be a great start. They're the ones who are going to drive that culture through the organisation. They will go into the peer review circles and potentially start out chairing them, but set them on the path, setting the standard of how we want the reviews to be done and explain the structure of that. I think make sure it is constructive, because it's very easy for people to start, he did that, have you seen this? And try to keep it positive about the work and what to do differently. Is there a gap in the information out there first? But we do, we've got that process, and it's about, if you don't like what people are doing, hopefully we've got a constructive, respectful bunch of people so that they can have the conversation at the outset. If they've not, there's a complaints process where it'll go through and review for vexatious complaints. If it's not vexatious, then it gets sent out to a group of people who are, if it's a quality of work sort of thing, goes out to a set of those experienced people who are relevant to the area that's being discussed. I will not be on the conditional simulation discussions if it's an announcement about that. But that approach, those three people will make an assessment. If you get a majority of those, or I think it's the three, have to agree that there's an issue, then we've got a complaints committee that is set up. They will, they will make an assessment, and there'll be an outcome of that. A lot of them, it may not get to the ethics committee. It might just come to a director or an experienced person to give someone a phone call and say,
right.
There's a better way. Have you thought about this? Okay. If they come back and say, get stuffed, never want to hear from you again, well then they've got a red flag for whether we want them as a part of the association.
Well, what if they're not part of the association? I mean, you pick up a red flag somewhere, of somebody who is just saying, fuck off, I'm not interested in this,
Or if people are doing things that are part of an organisation that warrants something being done about, that's for the organisation that they're a member of.
Yeah, right, and you can never protect yourself against that, but that's... okay. That's
so, like it could be having a phone call. Me for me, one of the things that we've discussed is, if they give some commitment for future change, education, maybe an amendment, like we all make mistakes. There's a lot of pressure to get stuff through. Fix it, put out an amendment. ASX clearly doesn't have a problem with people putting out a flurry of...
I still to this day don't understand clients' anxiety around the reissuing. There's an overcorrection there sometimes. Anyway, that's for another day.
And it comes down to materiality. So, we may direct to do an amendment, and if the member chooses not to do an amendment, that will probably potentially challenge their membership of the organisation.
Right.
Through to, if it comes down to egregious ongoing breaches, will they get sanctioned or...
you're going to have a lot of stuff to do, eh?
We don't have many members to start with.
No, sure. No, I take your point. But maybe as a last point, and again, we got into it a little bit offline, but as much as the intent is not to interfere with the other organization, surely, it is obvious to everyone that there will be somebody who perceives this as a conflict, right? And you can't help that, right? And it might not be intended, but obviously, ultimately, when you're going for RPO, we know how many people are just members of those organizations just because of the signing off on reports. And there'll be thousands, not just a few hundreds. So from a revenue perspective, whether you want or like it or not, you're going to compete there, right? And that by itself is going to create a bit of friction. And maybe we need that friction. Maybe we need that actual disturbing left field force to come in and upset this a little bit. But just to poke the bear a little bit, isn't that a bit naive to say, we won't have that conflict because we're trying to be altruistic about it, right? You're going to have these institutes say, no, we don't want this, right? And they have something to really protect there. And I can see something that, you want to think about that, right? Yeah.
So I agree with that, but we think that there is a gap, and we can improve the reputation of the industry, make it easier to get money, and money going to the right destination. We can help educate people by putting a focus on the quality of reporting. And maybe we're naive, and it is altruistic, but even if it ends up with the five of us still sitting in the cafe once a month,
still adding value,
and people want to join us sitting in there, I'm getting something out of it. Jackie's getting something out of it. Vince is getting something out of it.
And I really, and again, not to just antagonize for the sake of a soundbite or anything, but I do worry about that, because I like these sort of initiatives from how can we contribute to a better industry, right? I absolutely love it, but you gotta work with the people that are in the same space to some degree. And make sure that nobody feels so threatened that they start overreacting to it, right? And
I see it from another perspective, and to go back to one of the points that you made before about being able to fund it, and we've spoke about it in workshops before. Like, it's a member-based organisation. We've got a concept of how to start it, and that will evolve. I've got ideas of how we fund it in the future, and there's an expansion beyond that. I've had a look at what goes on in Canada, and you've got CRM, I think it is, over there, that's gets funding through the assessing the qualities. So there's a lot of options of funding.
For the record, I don't think there's a problem with funding. I mean, it needs to be solved, but it's not unsolvable at all.
With the other two associations, like I see, you got GSA does great work. Their bent seems to be more on the earlier stage and education side of things. AIG, for me, that's the heart of technical geology, is in the AIG, and AusIMM, has a huge spread of what it covers. Engineering, surveying, met, a lot of the softer issues coming in there as well, environment as well. We just see that there's a community of not just technical professionals, but we'd like lawyers and COSECs. And get the sharing of information. I was just talking to someone before, and they're saying, company secretaries get together and they've got their circles about what did ASX pick up this month, where have they gone to? And I talk to my peers about, did you get away with this? What do we need to put in to get away with it? And it's creating those circles so those conversations.
I mean, the community itself. I mean, I think it's a fantastic idea in principle, and as you would as a business person, you try to break it. You try to see the weaknesses in your SWOT analysis or whatever you want to do, but it sounds like you guys have thought about this a fair bit, and well done for getting it to a launch point and actually doing it. This is very, very good.
We welcome people to apply. There's a lot in the Constitution, the bylaws, policies there. So before you get on board,
the website mra.org, I think it is. Minerals Reporting Australia. Mineralsreporting.org. Okay, so for those who are listening or interested, go check that out. And Matt, thanks for joining me, man.
Cool.
Thanks.